Well, it's probably for the best, because instead we got Bill Wallace, and he is definitely one of the most memorable parts of UFC 1, for better or worse.
Well, as Sean and I described in Chapter 11, the first UFC, Bill, who had decided to accept the offer to become the play-by-play guy because Jim Brown felt it was outside of his abilities, and we offered Bill more money, and he accepted. But I don't think Bill really did his homework because, as you know, he got on the mic and he proceeded to call the event the Ultimate Fighting Challenge twice.
When he wasn't busy choking on himself.
Yes, and then he was having, I don't know whether he maybe had a drink or two before, and I do not know. I do know that, as I talk about in the book, that he, had not made a lot of friends at the event, and he kind of he was assuming some sort of an attitude in a way. The Gracies had done a seminar available to everybody Friday morning. The other fighters, the public, everybody. And they had a whole bunch of people show up to one of the hotel ballrooms there in the hotel. And Kathy Long put on her sweats as part of the commentating team, and she got on that roll. And Bill did not roll. He stayed dressed. He stayed with his back up against the wall, kind of making comments, sotto voce, about what he would do in this situation or that. And I was standing there with Jim Brown, and Jim looked at me like, I think this guy's full of soup, And that was the kind of the take we had on Wallace. Now, I'd never met Bill before that, and I'd never seen him since, by the way. I do know that in January of 1994, he authored a column in which he was critical of NHP events. And that column would have had to have been written and submitted to the magazine probably about the same time or even maybe a little before he'd accepted our gig. So his performance that night on the microphone, where he proceeded not only to get the name of the event wrong, but he mangled everyone's name in the event. He called Royce at one point Rod. He pronounced his name Royce. He made Rod Machado Rod Machacho. He never got Rich Going's name correct. And then some of his quotes were like doozies. We just shook. I went and listened to the tape later, and I just shook my head thinking, what happened to him? I don't know. I do know that the first fight, I think, stunned him, as it stunned everybody, including our sponsors from Gold's Gym that was sitting cage side and watched the shattered remains of Taylor Tooley's front incisor sail over their heads and sail over Wallace's head. And I thought Wallace, in a sense, lost a certain amount of cool when that happened and never quite seemed to recover that composure. The guy who did the best job as a commentator that night, and the guy who didn't say as much or didn't say a lot, was Jim Brown.
Yeah, Jim Brown was definitely great, and Jim Brown stuck around for a few more events, which was a really good thing, good addition to the team. And
yes.
while we're on UFC 1 again, because I've gotten so off topic already, it's so easy to get off topic with you, because there's just so much that you know about the old UFC, it's great, but back to UFC 1, one of the most infamous moments of that first event was definitely Art Jimmerson and his one glove. And in your book, you actually talk about the story. It goes even deeper than that, the fact that Art didn't even have his own gear to start with. So can you tell us about that story and the Art Jimmerson infamous glove hand?
You know, in chapter 11, I talk about the dress rehearsal and I talk about the fights themselves, and is this legal? And for the dress rehearsal, I had everybody bring their clothing and show them what they were going to wear. I just wanted to approve it or to disapprove it or make some suggestions. And Art came along in his beautiful boxing trunks with his name, Art King Jimmerson, emblazoned on them, black silk trunks, satin trunks, looked great. And then right before the event, I'm checking everyone's equipment in the dressing area. And I turned to Jimmerson and said, show me your gloves. And he said, I didn't bring no gloves or shoes. I was shocked. I said, what do you mean you didn't bring no gloves? What do you mean? You're here. You're the number 10 ranked cruiserweight in the world by the IBF. You're supposed to fight Tommy Hitman and Hearns in 6 weeks. You're telling me you didn't bring any equipment? He said, no, I didn't think I needed to or had to. I said, I couldn't even yell at him at this point. I got a hold of Kathy together and then walkie-talkie and started screaming that we had a crisis. And that she had to get on the phone with the yellow pages and find a sporting goods store that was open on Friday night and find me a set of 8 or 10-ounce gloves quickly. She actually tracked down a sporting goods store in Arvada, a suburb of Denver, and I called over the hotel and got my kid brother, who was getting dressed to get ready to watch the fights that night. You know what I mean? And I said to him, Matthew, get a cab and come over here to the arena and come right to the back gate I need to see you immediately. You have to do something for me. But my brother was over there in about 15 minutes, and I grabbed a hold of him, and I took $300 bills from my wallet and said, here's cash. I said, I already had a cab waiting, a taxi waiting. I said, give him his cab. Here's the address. This guy is waiting for you to come. Just go inside, give him the cash, pick up the boxing gloves, pick up the shoes, and get back here yesterday. I said, you understand? He said, yeah. I said, don't mess this up. You have to be back here for the show, otherwise I'm dead. My brother went to Arvada, picked it up, came back, but he forgot he had left his all access pass. So when he gets where he did not have it with him. He actually left it back at the hotel. In his rush to get over to your meeting, he forgot it. So I was there at the back gate to greet him, so there was no problem then. But when he showed up at the front gate with the gloves and the shoes, the guards wouldn't let him in. They thought it was a nut fan who was attempting to fight that night and bring his own equipment. They wouldn't let him in the arena. So we finally got a call from security. There's some nut out here with some equipment, and he's claiming that he knows you. So I finally got a hold of the gloves and the shoes, ran in and gave them to Jimmerson. And Jimmerson said, well, these aren't boxing shoes. I said, hey, beggars can't beat shoes. They're New Balance running shoes. Get in there and do your best. So when the third bout happens in UFC history, Royce versus Jimmerson, I'm in the truck, the pay-per-view truck with Michael Pilot, our line producer, and Mark Lucas, our director. And I'm looking at the screen, and I'm getting ready to go back to the side of the octagon again. I've been moving back and forth from place to place, going from there to the dressing room. And I look on the screen, and I see Jimmerson showing up with one glove. And Lucas turns to me and says, you know what's going on? And words were coming out, but I don't know what I was saying. I was in a state of shock. And it was too late for me to go and run to the octagon and stop it. They were introducing the fighters. So Art Jimmerson decided at the last minute that he's going to have one hand free. Now you got to remember that Jimmerson really got his brains scrambled the week of the show. At one point, he was rolling around and working out, and Don McCarthy came over, and they got talking. And Jimmerson said, yeah, I'm not going to have any problem with these boys. He said, I'm going to throw a couple of jabs like this. So he throws a couple of jabs at McCarthy, and McCarthy said, hey, that's pretty fast. And he says, well, do you think you could really hit me, if we were sparring? And Jimmerson said, absolutely. You want to go around? So McCarthy says, absolutely. When Jimmerson throws a couple of jabs, McCarthy ducks, takes him down in the double leg takedown. Now he mounts Jimmerson, and he cocks his fist to his face. He says, now what are you going to do? So by the time that Jimmerson was by the side of the octagon on Friday night, I think he had been mentally mixed up, shook up, confused, and frightened. And I think that McCarthy helped shatter some of his confidence, because he was starting to hear rumors that week that a guy like Royce could break your arm. That's what they do. He could break your elbow. And I guess Jimmerson was thinking, I got this fight coming up that my manager and agent is trying to lock in for me with Tommy Hitman Hearns. If I could fight Hearns and do well, that would really help my career. But I think by the time Jimmerson stepped into the octagon, he was mentally mixed up and unprepared.
Yeah, now, I've got a bigger picture question for you now. When fighters started actually cross-training, which, UFC 1, that didn't happen, but didn't take long for fighters to start realizing they had to cross-train to other things, like Pat Smith at UFC 2, for example. But as that trend continued and more fighters started cross-training, were you worried that the concept of style versus style would ultimately die out and be a problem for your business model? Or were you actually excited that things were becoming more different?
No, I'll tell you what I noticed right away. And internally, we all knew what was going on. Right away, two things started to evolve. Number one, the rules. We had to go back after UFC 1 and decide we need a better referee. Before we were adding time limits. We were adding, shortening the time limits. We were adding rounds. We were adding judging. We were adding gloves. We were adding weight classes. So the evolution of the rules was inevitable. And the second thing was the evolution of the fighters themselves. Between UFC 3 and 4, Kimo Leopoldo shows up at the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu Academy asking Horion for jiu-jitsu lessons. The bright guys were going into the gym and filling in the gaps of what they couldn't do and what they needed to learn. So early on, I saw that this was evolving, and there was no way that it needed to be stopped. It was part of what would make these performers, these athletes, better performers. They would be better at what they did. Was it inevitable? Absolutely. And we saw it early on. Now, admittedly, my P.T. Barnum idea of style versus style in a tournament was actually brilliant in retrospect. I'll tell you why. If a martial arts guy, a karate tournament promoter, let's say, had organized this thing would have started off in a way that it wouldn't be what it is today. It might have not have been successful at all or lasted, because they would have gotten involved in the nuances of the martial arts, and they would have, they would have gotten lost in that whole. That's what the politics has always been a problem with the martial arts development in America as an entertainment. When I got to HBO, Showtime, and ESPN, they told me, hey, we got memos floating around here that says, if anybody brings us a martial arts idea, show them the door. Most people belong in the movies. Nobody in that business knows how to sell for television. So I think, in a way, the tournament idea, pay-per-view, was crucial. I think my willingness and ability to bring in sumo wrestlers and guys like Tank Abbott widened the appeal, made sure that the fan knew, hey, we were just looking for the best guys in the world, whether they were Sambo, Greco-Roman, professional boxing, Penjack Salat. I didn't care. Wherever they came from. And if eventually the guy from Penjack Salat learned how to grapple, learned Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so much the better.